The scrapyard stretched endlessly under the pale morning sun, a graveyard of twisted metal and broken dreams that Jake called home. Somewhere in the distance, the automated sorters hummed their mechanical lullaby, separating copper from steel, aluminum from plastic. Jake wiped the grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades and squinted at the addition to his domain. The ship sat like a wounded bird among the terrestrial debris, its hull a strange amalgamation of curves and angles that hurt to look at for too long. Most people would have called it junk, another piece of space debris to be processed and recycled. Jake saw something else entirely. "Computer, run a preliminary scan on Section 7 Alpha," he called out to his workshop AI, a cobbled-together system he'd built from salvaged components over the years. "Jake, that vessel is broadcasting an unknown energy signature. Recommend maintaining safe distance," the AI responded in its familiar synthetic voice. "When have I ever played it safe?" Jake chuckled, using the name he'd given his AI years ago when loneliness had driven him to humanize his only companion. He grabbed his toolkit and approached the alien craft. The ship was roughly the size of a small cargo hauler, but its design everything Jake knew about aerodynamics and space travel. The hull seemed to flow like liquid metal frozen in time, with no visible seams or welding marks. Strange symbols flickered weakly along its surface, pulsing in a rhythm that reminded him of a heartbeat. As Jake circled the vessel, his trained eye the damage. Whatever had brought this ship down had been catastrophic. Scoring along the hull suggested weapon damage, while several sections showed the telltale signs of severe structural stress. But what caught his attention was a series of what looked like claw marks near what he assumed was the main access point. "This is either the biggest waste of time in my life or the discovery of the century," Jake muttered, running his hand along the hull. The metal felt warm, almost alive, and seemed to pulse under his touch. Jake had been fixing things since he was old enough to hold a wrench. Growing up in the slums of New Detroit, he'd learned that everything could be repaired, rebuilt, or repurposed if you just understood how it worked. That philosophy had carried him through his service in the Terran Space Navy, where he'd kept aging vessels running long past their recommended service life. It had also led to his discharge when he'd refused to follow orders to scrap a ship that could have saved hundreds of lives with the right repairs. Now, at 35, Jake lived alone in the scrapyard he'd inherited from his uncle, fixing what others couldn't and finding purpose in giving broken things new life. This alien ship represented the ultimate challenge. He found what appeared to be an access panel near the bow of the ship. Unlike human designs, this one seemed to respond to proximity rather than physical manipulation. As Jake approached, the panel shimmered and became translucent, revealing a complex array of components unlike anything in his experience. "Are you getting readings on this?" "Affirmative. The technology appears to be based on principles unknown to current human science. Energy patterns suggest a living circuit system rather than traditional electronics." Jake nodded thoughtfully. Living circuits weren't entirely theoretical. Human scientists had been experimenting with bio-integrated systems for decades. But this was clearly far beyond anything humanity had achieved. He reached into the panel, careful not to disturb anything unnecessarily. The components felt organic under his touch, like touching the inside of a flower. His fingers found what seemed to be a damaged node, a crystalline structure that pulsed weakly with internal light. "This beauty's been hurt," Jake whispered, the same tone he'd used when finding injured animals as a child. "Let's see what we can do about that." Working on the alien ship became an obsession. Jake spent 18 hours a day learning its systems through trial and error, mapping the vessel's layout with the patience of an archaeologist. The ship's design was remarkably intuitive once he understood the basic principles. Instead of separate systems for power, life support, and navigation, everything was integrated into a single living network that adapted to changing conditions. The damage was extensive but not irreparable. Whatever had attacked the ship had known exactly where to hit to cause maximum systems failure. The main power core was offline, 3 of the navigation nodes were completely destroyed, and the life support system was barely functioning. But Jake had spent his entire adult life making the impossible possible. He started with the power core, a beautiful crystalline structure at the ship's heart that reminded him of a geometric flower. The core was cracked but not shattered, and Jake carefully wrapped it in conducting fiber to bridge the damaged sections. To his amazement, the core responded to the repair. its internal light growing stronger as the crystal network reestablished connections. Are you monitoring the power output? Jake, this is remarkable. The efficiency rating is beyond anything in our databases. The ship is somehow converting ambient energy into usable power at nearly 100% efficiency. With power restored to basic systems, Jake began working on the navigation network. This proved more challenging, as the destroyed nodes needed to be completely replaced. Human technology wasn't compatible with the alien systems, but Jake had always been creative with his solutions. He salvaged crystalline components from various electronic devices, carefully shaping them to match the alien specifications. The work required a delicate touch, as the ship's system seemed to actively resist incompatible materials. But slowly, patiently, Jake convinced the ship to accept his hybrid solutions. The life support system was perhaps the most fascinating challenge. Instead of mechanical air recyclers and water purifiers, the ship used what appeared to be living organisms to maintain atmospheric balance. These tiny creatures, visible only under magnification, had died when the ship's systems failed. Jake couldn't bring them back to life, but he could create mechanical substitutes that performed the same functions. 2 weeks into his project, something changed. Jake was working deep inside the ship's systems, replacing damaged biocircuits with his own improvised solutions when he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it, like a whispered sigh carried on the recycled air. He froze, listening intently. There it was again, not mechanical, not electronic, but something organic, something alive. Are you detecting any life signs aboard the vessel? Negative, Jake. All bioscanners show no signs of life. But Jake trusted his instincts more than his instruments. He'd learned long ago that machines could lie, but instincts rarely did. He began searching the ship more carefully, looking for anything he might have missed. The ship was larger inside than its external dimensions suggested, another impossibility that Jake had filed away for later consideration. He'd mapped most of the interior, identifying what he believed were crew quarters, common areas, and specialized workspaces. But there were sections that remained sealed, areas where his repairs hadn't yet restored functionality. Following the sound, Jake made his way to the rear of the ship, where a section he'd assumed was storage remained inaccessible. The biomechanical locks hadn't responded to his repairs, remaining stubbornly sealed despite his best efforts. But now, with the ship's power restored and its basic systems functioning, the locks were beginning to respond. The sealed chamber opened with a soft whisper of equalizing pressure. Inside, Jake found something that stopped him cold. It was clearly a medical bay, but unlike anything in human experience. The chamber was filled with a soft, bioluminescent glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. In the center of the room was a pod-like structure, similar to the medical stasis units used on human ships but organic in design. And inside the pod, barely visible through the translucent biomembrane, was a figure. Jake approached carefully, his heart hammering in his chest. The figure was humanoid but clearly not human. Even through the distortion of the pod's membrane, he could see features that were distinctly alien yet somehow familiar. The being was tall and lean, with elongated limbs and what appeared to be fur or fine scales covering its skin. Most striking were the facial features, which seemed to blend human and canine characteristics in a way that was both beautiful and unsettling. The being's ears were pointed and mobile, positioned high on its skull, while its face had an elongated muzzle filled with sharp teeth visible even in its unconscious state. "My God," Jake whispered, "you're still alive." The pod systems were barely functional, maintaining life, but unable to provide healing. Jake could see damage indicators throughout the medical bay, suggesting that the being inside had been wounded when the ship was attacked. Without proper medical intervention, the alien would die. Jake had no knowledge of alien physiology, no understanding of the medical systems he was looking at, and no guarantee that his interference wouldn't cause more harm than good. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He couldn't walk away and let a sentient being die. "I need you to interface with the ship's medical systems. See if you can establish basic communication protocols with their computer." "Jake, this is extremely dangerous. We have no knowledge of alien biology or medical procedures. We're not performing surgery. We're just trying to stabilize the systems keeping our friend here alive until we can figure out something better." Jake spent the next several hours carefully studying the medical bay systems. Like everything else on the ship, the medical technology was bio-integrated and intuitive once he understood the basic principles. The pod was designed to maintain life and accelerate healing, but several critical components had been damaged in the attack. Working with the same patience he'd shown with the rest of the ship, Jake began repairing the medical systems. He replaced burned-out biocircuits, bridged damaged connections, and slowly brought the medical bay back to full functionality. As the pod systems came online, Jake watched in fascination as the aliens' vital signs strengthened. Soft lights began pulsing throughout the medical bay in what he assumed was a positive rhythm, and the being inside the pod seemed to relax into deeper, more restful unconsciousness. "There you go," Jake murmured, placing his hand on the pod's surface. "Sleep easy, friend, your ship's in good hands." As if responding to his voice, the alien's ears twitched slightly, and its breathing deepened. For a moment, Jake could have sworn he saw the hint of a smile cross its muzzle-like features. Jake returned to his repairs with renewed purpose. This wasn't just about fixing an interesting piece of technology anymore. There was a living being depending on his skills, trusting him to restore their ship to functionality. The weight of that responsibility should have been crushing, but instead Jake found it invigorating. He worked through the night and into the next day, pushing himself harder than he had in years. Every system he repaired brought the ship closer to full functionality, and hopefully brought its unconscious passenger closer to recovery. The navigation system was the final major hurdle. Without it, the ship would never be able to return home, wherever home might be for its alien pilot. Jake had replaced the destroyed nodes with his improvised substitutes, but the system still refused to come online. Something was missing, some final component that would tie everything together. It was who provided the breakthrough. "Jake, I believe the navigation system requires a biological component to function properly. All the other ship systems use bio-integration, but navigation seems to require an actual living interface." Jake stared at the navigation console, understanding dawning on him slowly. The ship wasn't just bio-integrated, it was symbiotic. It needed its pilot to function properly, just as the pilot needed the ship to survive in space. "So our friend in the medical bay isn't just a passenger," Jake mused. "They're part of the ship itself." This changed everything. The ship and its pilot were partners, each dependent on the other for survival. No wonder the navigation system wouldn't function without its biological component. The ship was literally incomplete without its partner. Jake redoubled his efforts on the medical systems, understanding now that healing the pilot was just as important as repairing the ship. They were two parts of a single entity, and both needed to be whole for either to truly function. As the third week of his project drew to a close, Jake stood back and surveyed his work. The alien ship hummed with restored life, its bioluminescent panels glowing steadily as its systems functioned at near-optimal efficiency. The medical bay showed all green indicators, and the being inside the pod seemed to be healing steadily. "Run a full systems diagnostic. All major systems are online and functioning within normal parameters. Jake, I believe you've achieved something remarkable here." Jake smiled, exhaustion and pride warring in his chest. He'd taken a dying ship and brought it back to life, saved an alien being whose species humanity had never even encountered. It should have been the culmination of his career, the moment he'd remember for the rest of his life. Instead, he found himself wondering what would happen next. The ship was repaired, its pilot was healing, and eventually they would both leave. Jake would return to his quiet life in the scrapyard, fixing broken human technology, and trying not to think about the brief moment when he'd touched something truly extraordinary. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, Jake allowed himself to feel the satisfaction of a job well done. He'd proven once again that anything could be fixed if you just cared enough to try. In the medical bay, the alien's eyes moved beneath closed lids, and its tail twitched in what might have been a dream. The ship's systems registered the movement and adjusted accordingly, maintaining perfect environmental conditions for healing. Neither Jake nor noticed the subtle change in the ship's energy patterns, the way its bioluminescent panels seemed to pulse in harmony with its pilot's improving condition. The ship was preparing for something, responding to cues that its human mechanic couldn't detect or understand. Soon, very soon, everything would change. Jake was calibrating the ship's atmospheric processors when the medical bay's alarm chimed softly. Unlike the harsh klaxons of human technology, the alien ship's alerts were melodic, almost musical in their urgency. He dropped his tools and rushed to the medical chamber, his heart racing with possibilities both hopeful and terrifying. The pod was opening. The biomembrane that had protected the alien for weeks slowly retracted, dissolving into the pod's structure like morning mist touched by sunlight. Jake watched in fascination as the being inside stirred, drawing its first unassisted breath in what might have been months. The alien's eyes opened slowly, revealing irises of the deepest amber Jake had ever seen. They were distinctly non-human, yet held an intelligence that was immediately recognizable. For a long moment, alien and human simply stared at each other across the impossible gulf of species and space. Then the alien tried to sit up and immediately collapsed back into the pod, with a pained whimper that sounded remarkably like a wounded dog. "Easy there," Jake said softly, holding up his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "You've been hurt. Your ship found its way to me, and I've been working on repairs." The alien's head turned toward Jake's voice, ears swiveling to focus on the sound with an attention that was almost comical. The being's mouth opened slightly, revealing those sharp teeth Jake had noticed earlier, but no sound emerged. After a moment, the alien closed its eyes and seemed to concentrate. When it opened them again, Jake heard something that made his jaw drop. "You fixed my ship." The voice was definitely alien, with an odd harmonic quality that suggested multiple vocal cords, but the words were unmistakably English. The accent was strange, placing emphasis in unexpected places, but the meaning was clear. "You speak English?" Jake asked, amazed. The alien's expression shifted into what might have been amusement. "No, ship. Translates, links minds through, bioneural interface, your thoughts become understandable sounds." Jake looked around the medical bay with new respect. The ship wasn't just translating language, it was somehow bridging the gap between alien and human consciousness. "That's incredible. How long have you been?" talking to the ship. "Always." The alien struggled to find words that would make sense to a human mind. "Ship is partner, part of self, born together, live together, die together, you understand." Jake thought about his relationship with, how his AI had become more than just a tool over the years. "I think so. You and your ship are bonded somehow." "Yes, bond broken when ship damaged. I was dying, ship was dying, until you." The alien's amber eyes focused on Jake with startling intensity. "You saved us both." The words hit Jake harder than he'd expected. He'd spent weeks working on the ship, driven by curiosity and professional pride, never really considering the broader implications of his actions. Now, faced with the living being he'd helped save, the weight of what he'd accomplished settled over him. "I'm Jake," he said finally. "This is my scrapyard on Earth in the Sol system." The alien attempted to sit up again, moving more carefully this time. Jake noticed that the being was definitely wolf-like in appearance, with digitigrade legs, a tail that twitched expressively, and fur that shifted color in the medical bay's bioluminescent light. The overall effect was somehow both alien and familiar, like meeting a distant cousin from a dream. "I am," the alien paused, and Jake could almost feel the ship working to translate concepts that had no human equivalent. "Name translates poorly. You may call me, it means one who sees clearly in darkness in your language." Jake repeated and was surprised to see the alien's ears perk up at the sound. "That's a beautiful name. Are you feeling well enough to move around? I'd like to show you what I've done to your ship." His attempt to stand was less successful. The alien's legs, already unfamiliar in their reverse-jointed configuration, seemed weak from the long healing sleep. After several failed attempts, looked at Jake with what could only be described as embarrassment. "The healing pod was damaged when your ship was attacked," Jake explained gently. "Your body needs time to remember how to work properly. Here, let me help." Jake offered his arm for support, and after a moment's hesitation, accepted it. The alien's hand was larger than a human's, with longer fingers and claws that could have been weapons but were carefully kept retracted. The fur-covering arm was incredibly soft, like touching a cloud made of silk. Together, they made their slow way out of the medical bay and into the ship's main corridor. Moved with the careful concentration of someone relearning basic motor functions, but Jake could see strength returning with each step. Your work is, paused in the corridor, one hand pressed against the wall. Jake realized the alien was communicating directly with the ship, receiving information through that bioneural link. Remarkable. Ship says you understood systems without training, without instruction. How is this possible? Jake shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I've been fixing things my whole life. Your ship's design is intuitive once you understand the basic principles. Everything's connected, everything works together. It's actually simpler than human technology in some ways. Simpler? Ears flattened against its skull in what Jake was learning to recognize as surprise. These systems took my people centuries to develop. Our greatest engineers struggle with repairs this complex. Well, maybe that's the problem, Jake said thoughtfully. You've made it too complicated. Sometimes the best solution is the simple one. They continued their tour of the ship, with Jake pointing out the repairs he'd made and translating the ship's responses. The alien vessel was practically purring with contentment, its bioluminescent panels glowing more brightly than Jake had ever seen them. Whatever the ship was telling was clearly positive, because the alien's tail had begun wagging in a motion that was endearingly familiar. Ship is happy, explained, noticing Jake's observation. Has been alone, injured, afraid. Now is whole again and not alone. Ship likes you, Jake. I like your ship too, Jake admitted. It's been the most interesting project I've ever worked on. They reached the navigation console, where Jake's hybrid biomechanical interfaces gleamed amid the alien technology. Examined the repairs with obvious fascination, running its clawed fingers over Jake's improvisations with the reverence of an art lover studying a masterpiece. These modifications, they should not work, said finally. Your technology, our technology, they operate on different principles, yet you have created harmony between them. How? Jake considered the question seriously. I think it's because I didn't try to make your technology work like ours. I tried to understand what your systems needed and found ways to provide it. It's like... Jake searched for an analogy that would translate properly. Like learning to sing a song in a language you don't speak. You don't need to understand every word to carry the tune. His ears perked forward in what Jake was beginning to recognize as intense interest. You think of repair work as art. Isn't it? Jake asked. Every broken thing is unique, with its own story and its own needs. The challenge is understanding what it's trying to tell you and finding a way to help it be whole again. For a long moment, simply stared at Jake with those incredible amber eyes. When the alien finally spoke, its voice carried a note of something that might have been wonder. My people would say you have the touch. It is. Rare gift. Ability to understand living systems without formal training. Most who have it become healers or... The ship provided a translation that made tail twitch with amusement. Ship singers, those who bond with vessels and help them reach their full potential. Ship singers, Jake repeated, liking the sound of it. That's a beautiful concept. You would be honored among my people, said seriously. What you have done here, it is not just repair work. It is art, yes, but also miracle. Ship says you worked for weeks without rest, learning our systems through intuition and patience. No payment requested, no reward expected. Why? The question caught Jake off guard. He'd never really analyzed his motivations for taking on the alien ship project. It had simply seemed like the right thing to do. I couldn't just leave you to die, he said finally. I don't know much about your people or your culture, but I know that life is precious. Intelligence is precious. The universe is big and mostly empty, and any spark of consciousness we find in it should be protected. Was quiet for a long time, processing Jake's words through both the ship's translation system and its own understanding. When it spoke again, its voice was soft with emotion. My name, it said, my real name, translates as Stardaughter who walks between worlds. I am an explorer, a seeker of new experiences and knowledge. My mission was to investigate reports of a new intelligent species in this sector, a species that had recently achieved space travel but remained isolated. Jake felt a chill of understanding. You came here to study humans. Yes, but my ship was damaged in an encounter with... Paused, and Jake could sense the alien working through traumatic memories. With those who do not believe different species should coexist. We barely escaped, and I thought we would die in the void between stars. Instead, you found me. Instead, I found someone who embodies everything I hoped to discover about humanity. His tail was wagging again, a sign of excitement that Jake was beginning to find endearing. Your species is young, barely past your first tentative steps into space, yet you possess qualities that older races have forgotten. Such as curiosity without malice, generosity without expectation of reward, the ability to see connection where others see only difference, gestured to the ship around them. You took alien technology and made it work not by forcing it to conform to your understanding, but by expanding your understanding to accommodate it. This is rare wisdom. Jake felt a flush of pride and embarrassment. I just did what seemed right. Exactly, morality that comes naturally without complex philosophy or cultural conditioning. My people will be very interested in your species. A thought occurred to Jake that he probably should have considered weeks earlier. Are there more ships coming, more of your people? Eventually, yes, but not for some time. My mission was to observe and report, not to make contact. I was to remain hidden, studying your species from a distance. His expression became somewhat rueful. Clearly, that plan required modification. Jake couldn't help but laugh at the understatement. I'd say your cover is blown, yes, so what happens now? Now, moved to the navigation console and placed its hand on one of Jake's hybrid interfaces. The console lit up immediately, responding to the alien's bioneural connection. Now I must decide whether to return home with my report or to remain and continue my studies. The ship's systems came fully online as interfaced with them, and Jake watched in amazement as displays activated throughout the corridor. Star charts appeared on the walls, showing local space with a detail and accuracy that human astronomy could only dream of. He could see his own solar system clearly marked, along with dozens of others in the nearby region. Your repairs are perfect, said, and Jake could hear the amazement in the alien's voice. All systems are functioning at optimal efficiency. The ship is ready for interstellar travel. Jake felt a sudden emptiness at the thought of the ship leaving. Over the past weeks, the alien vessel had become the most important thing in his life. The idea of returning to his quiet existence in the scrapyard seemed unbearable now that he'd experienced the challenge and wonder of working on truly advanced technology. How long would it take you to reach your home? He asked. Several of your months, even with the ship restored to full capability, studied the star charts thoughtfully. Long enough for me to compose a proper report on what I have learned. And what have you learned? Turned away from the navigation console to face Jake directly. That first impressions can be deceiving, that wisdom and compassion are not dependent on technological advancement, that sometimes the most profound discoveries come not from careful observation, but from unexpected acts of kindness. Jake felt something shift in the air between them, a subtle change in posture and expression that suggested a decision being made. There is another option, of course. Which is, I could request permission to establish an extended observation post, to study human culture and technology more thoroughly before making my final report. His tail was wagging slowly now, a sign Jake was learning to associate with hopeful anticipation. Such a study would require a base of operations, perhaps in a location where unusual technology would not attract unwanted attention. Jake looked around the ship with new understanding. You want to stay? I want to learn more about the species that produced Jake, about humans who can look at alien technology and see not a threat to be destroyed or a prize to be claimed, but simply a problem to be solved. Amber eyes met Jake's with startling directness. I want to understand how a simple mechanic can accomplish what trained engineers cannot. I'm not that special, Jake protested. Any decent mechanic could have done what I did. Could they? Challenged. Your own species builds machines that break down regularly and require constant maintenance. Yet in 3 weeks, you repaired systems that have functioned flawlessly for decades. You worked with technologies completely outside your experience and created solutions that improve on the original design. No, Jake, you are not typical of your species. Jake felt a warm glow at the praise, but also a nagging doubt. What if I'm just a lucky amateur? What if I got lucky with your ship but can't repeat the performance? His expression shifted into what Jake was beginning to recognize as amusement. Then I suppose we shall have to test that theory. Ship says there are other damaged vessels in your scrapyard. Perhaps we could examine them together. The prospect of working on more alien technology, possibly with guidance and the ship's advanced analysis capabilities, made Jake's heart race with excitement. You're serious? You want to stay here and work on repairs? I want to learn about human ingenuity by observing it directly. You want to understand more about alien technology. This seems like a mutually beneficial arrangement. His tail was wagging faster now, betraying its excitement despite its calm tone. Of course, there would be conditions, such as secrecy for now. My people do not yet know about your species' level of development, and premature contact could be problematic. If I remain, it must be as a hidden observer, not an official ambassador. Jake nodded thoughtfully. The implications of harboring an alien refugee were staggering, but the alternative, watching leave and never seeing such wonders again, was unthinkable. I can keep a secret. This scrapyard is pretty isolated and I don't get many visitors, but what about supplies, food, medical needs? I don't know anything about your biology. Ship can synthesize most of what I require from basic elements. As for food, the expression became almost shy. I am omnivorous like humans. My dietary requirements are not significantly different from yours. And if someone does discover you, government agents, other aliens, whoever attacked your ship in the first place. His demeanor became serious, and Jake caught a glimpse of the steel beneath the alien's friendly exterior. I am trained in covert operations and self-defense. My ship, while appearing damaged, is now fully functional and capable of rapid departure if necessary. The risk is minimal. Jake considered the offer seriously. Harboring an alien could bring down the full weight of every government on Earth if discovered. On the other hand, the chance to learn about technology centuries ahead of human development was beyond priceless. And honestly, after weeks of working alone on the ship, the prospect of having someone who truly understood the technology was incredibly appealing. What would you tell your people about the delay in your report? That I am conducting an extended study of human technology and behavior. That preliminary observations suggest your species may be suitable for eventual contact, but more data is required to make a proper recommendation. His tail had slowed its wagging, but Jake could see hope in the alien's amber eyes. It would not be entirely false. Jake made his decision with the same intuitive certainty that had guided him through the ship repairs. Welcome to Earth. I hope you learn everything you're looking for. The alien's ears perked straight up, and its tail began wagging so enthusiastically that Jake worried it might be injured. You agree? Truly. I agree, but I have one condition of my own. His expression became cautious. Which is? Jake grinned. I want to learn about your technology too, real understanding, not just intuitive repairs. If we're going to be working together, I want to know what I'm doing. This can be arranged. Ship has extensive educational databases, and I am qualified to teach basic engineering principles. Paused, then added something that sounded almost like laughter. Though based on your repair work, I suspect you will advance beyond basic very quickly. Outside the ship, the sun was setting over the scrapyard, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded Jake of amber eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new possibilities. Tonight, Jake allowed himself to savor the magnitude of what was happening. He'd set out to fix a broken ship and ended up changing the course of human history. Not bad for a simple mechanic from New Detroit. 3 months had passed since recovery, and Jake's scrapyard had transformed into something that would have made weep with envy. What had once been a simple collection of human debris now resembled a cross between a research laboratory and a museum of impossible technologies. The alien ship, now fully operational, served as their base of operations, had used its manufacturing capabilities to create tools and equipment that made Jake's previous workshop look like a cave dweller's toolkit. The ship's adaptive technology had learned to interface with human systems, creating hybrid devices that bridged the gap between species. Jake stood before a partially disassembled cargo hauler, one of dozens of vehicles that had found their way to his yard over the years. Under normal circumstances, the hauler would have been stripped for parts months ago. Its fusion reactor was burned out, its navigation computer was fried, and its hull integrity was compromised in 3 separate locations. Today, it was about to become something revolutionary. The bioneural integration matrix is calibrated and ready, announced from its position near the ship's main console. The alien had adapted remarkably well to Earth gravity and atmosphere, though it still moved with the fluid grace that Jake found both beautiful and slightly unnerving. And you're sure this won't cause the reactor to explode? Jake asked, running his hands over the hybrid control interface they'd installed in the hauler's engine compartment. The probability of catastrophic failure is less than 0.003%, his voice chimed in. Jake's AI had its own transformation over the past months, interfacing with the alien ship's computer systems to become something approaching true artificial intelligence. Those are good odds, Jake admitted. Better than some of the risks I took when I was working alone. Over the past 3 months, Jake had learned more about engineering than in his previous 35 years combined. People, who called themselves had been working with bio-integrated technology for over 2,000 years. Their understanding of living systems, energy dynamics, and materials science was so advanced that human science looked like finger painting in comparison. But the most surprising discovery was how much they could learn from human approaches to problem solving. Your species' tendency toward improvisation and creative adaptation is remarkable, had explained during one of their early collaborative sessions. My people spent centuries developing standardized solutions for every possible scenario. We have become inflexible. You see a broken system and immediately begin imagining new ways it might work. The cargo hauler project was the culmination of their collaborative research. Instead of simply repairing the vessel's damaged systems, they were upgrading it with biotechnology integrated through human engineering principles. The result would be a ship that could think, adapt, and evolve in ways that neither species could achieve alone. Initiating bioneural integration, Jake announced, activating the hybrid control interface. Throughout the hauler, dormant systems began coming online as the alien biotechnology interfaced with human machinery. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The cargo hauler's hull began to shimmer with the same bioluminescent patterns Jake had first seen on ship. The damaged fusion reactor stabilized and began operating at 97% efficiency, well above its original specifications. Most remarkably, the navigation computer began displaying star charts with accuracy that exceeded anything in human databases. Magnificent, breathed its tail wagging with excitement. The integration is perfect, the ship is alive. Jake watched in fascination as readouts scrolled past on his displays. The hauler wasn't just repaired, it was improved beyond anything its original designers could have imagined. The bioneural network was learning, adapting to the ship's specific needs and optimizing performance in real time. Are you interfacing with the hauler's new systems? Yes, Jake. The bioneural network is remarkably sophisticated. I believe I'm experiencing something analogous to what you might call friendship with the ship's new intelligence. Jake smiled at the wonder in his AI's voice. Had been his only companion for years, and seeing her develop new capabilities and relationships was deeply satisfying. How does it feel to have a friend? Complicated, Jake, but pleasant. The hauler's intelligence is very young but eager to learn. It reminds me of myself when you first activated my consciousness. The cargo hauler's transformation was just the latest in a series of successes that had established Jake's scrapyard as an unofficial research center for human-alien technological integration. Word had somehow spread through the spacer community about Jake's miraculous repair capabilities, and vessels arrived regularly with problems that traditional mechanics couldn't solve. Jake had become careful about which jobs he accepted, screening potential customers to ensure they wouldn't ask inconvenient questions about his methods or equipment. Most spacers were refreshingly practical people who cared more about results than explanations, but there were always exceptions. Jake said, its ears perked toward the scrapyard's entrance. Someone is coming, 3 vehicles moving fast. Jake felt his stomach clench with familiar anxiety. They'd developed protocols for unexpected visitors, but the possibility of discovery was always present. Scan the approaching vehicles. What are we dealing with? 3 modified atmospheric shuttles bearing corporate security markings. Configuration suggests private military contractors rather than government forces. Corporate security? Jake frowned. None of his recent customers had corporate connections that he knew of. Any idea which corporation? Negative, the markings are generic, possibly false identification. Was already moving toward its ship's concealed entrance. I should remain hidden until we know their intentions. Agreed. Jake activated the scrapyard's camouflage systems, a network of holographic projectors that had helped him install. To external observers, the alien ship would appear to be another pile of space debris. Lock down all the advanced systems and switch to standard human displays. The 3 shuttles landed in the scrapyard's main clearing, disgorging a dozen figures in tactical gear. Jake recognized the type immediately: corporate security contractors, the kind of people who asked questions with weapons and considered collateral damage an acceptable business expense. The leader of the group, a tall woman with the bearing of a military veteran, approached Jake's workshop with professional confidence. "Mister, I'm Commander Sarah, representing Meridian Dynamics Corporation. We need to discuss your recent activities." Jake kept his expression neutral while his mind raced. Meridian Dynamics was one of the largest aerospace corporations in human space, specializing in cutting-edge propulsion systems and exotic materials research. Their interest in his scrapyard could only mean trouble. "I'm not familiar with Meridian Dynamics," Jake lied smoothly. "What kind of activities are you referring to?" Smiled without warmth. "The kind that involve impossible repair jobs and technology that shouldn't exist. We've been tracking reports of ships leaving your facility with performance characteristics far beyond their original specifications. That's very interesting to a company like ours." "I'm just a mechanic," Jake said. "I fix things, sometimes I get lucky." "Lucky?" His tone made it clear what she thought of that explanation. "Mister, in the past 3 months, 17 separate vessels have left your facility with modifications that our best engineers can't explain. Ships with burned-out reactors suddenly operating at unprecedented efficiency levels. Navigation computers displaying star charts with accuracy that exceeds our most advanced systems. Hull materials showing properties that violate known physics." Jake's heart was hammering, but he kept his voice steady. "Sounds like you've been talking to some very creative storytellers." "We've been talking to our clients, mister. Clients who pay us very well for access to advanced technology." Gestured, and several of her security team moved to flank Jake's workshop. "We're prepared to make you a very generous offer for exclusive access to whatever process you're using." "And if I'm not interested in your offer?" Smile became predatory. "Then we'll have to insist. Meridian Dynamics has invested billions in research and development. We can't allow a single individual to monopolize technology that could revolutionize the entire aerospace industry." Jake felt a familiar anger building in his chest, the same fury that had led to his discharge from the Space Navy. Corporate greed disguised as legitimate business interests, the strong taking from the weak because they could. "You want my techniques? Here's a free lesson. Try treating broken things with respect instead of just seeing them as profit opportunities." "Respect doesn't generate quarterly returns, mister," nodded to her team, and Jake heard the distinctive whine of charging weapons. "Now, shall we discuss this like civilized people, or do we need to convince you?" Before Jake could respond, his voice echoed from hidden speakers throughout the scrapyard. "Commander, I believe you should reconsider your position." Spun, scanning for the source of the voice. "Who is that?" "I am Mr.'s partner and the scrapyard's security system. You are trespassing on private property and threatening the owner. Please leave immediately." "An AI," said dismissively. "Meridian Dynamics employs the most advanced artificial intelligences in known space. Your little helper doesn't concern us." "Perhaps it should," replied, and suddenly every piece of machinery in the scrapyard hummed to life. Cargo loaders moved into defensive positions, their massive arms extending toward the intruders. Welding drones swarmed overhead like angry metal insects. The holographic projectors activated, filling the air with confusing images and false targets. More importantly, several of Jake's recent repair projects began powering up their weapon systems. The cargo hauler they just finished upgrading rose smoothly into the air, its bioenhanced hull gleaming with energy patterns that made security team take nervous steps backward. "Impossible," breathed. "Those ships were decommissioned, stripped for parts. They can't possibly be functional." "Jake has a gift for making impossible things possible," said, and Jake could hear something like pride in the AI's voice. "He also has friends who don't appreciate threats against him." The cargo hauler descended until it hovered directly over the corporate security team, its newly installed bioneural systems analyzing each individual as potential targets. Jake realized that the ship was actually enjoying itself, reveling in its new capabilities like a child with a new toy. "You have 10 seconds to return to your shuttles and leave," announced. "After that, my friends and I will demonstrate some of the modifications Mr. has made to our defensive capabilities." Looked around the scrapyard with new understanding. recognizing that she'd walked into a trap. Her tactical assessment had been based on facing a single mechanic, not a coordinated defense network of upgraded alien-human hybrid technology. "This isn't over," she said, but Jake could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Meridian Dynamics has resources you can't imagine. We'll find out what you're doing here." "You're welcome to try," Jake replied. "But next time maybe call ahead. I don't like surprise visits." And her team retreated to their shuttles, but Jake noticed that several of them were using advanced recording equipment to document everything they could see. The corporate threat was far from over. If anything, he just painted a larger target on himself. As the shuttles disappeared into the afternoon sky, emerged from its ship's concealment. "That was well handled, but they will return with greater force." "I know," Jake watched the retreating shuttles with grim determination. "We need to accelerate our timeline." For months, Jake had been developing plans for the eventual disclosure of alien contact. The cargo hauler project was intended to be the first step, demonstrating the benefits of human-alien cooperation to carefully selected individuals within Earth's scientific community. "The corporate threat changes everything," agreed. "If Meridian Dynamics gains access to our technology through force or theft, they will use it for profit rather than advancement. The introduction of science to human civilization could become a source of conflict rather than cooperation." "So what do we do?" Amber eyes fixed on the horizon where the corporate shuttles had vanished. "We ensure that when contact is made, it is on our terms, not theirs. And we make certain that the first humans to benefit from technology are those who will use it wisely." That evening, as Jake worked on contingency plans, interrupted with an urgent communication. "Jake, I'm receiving a transmission on an encrypted channel. The sender identifies himself as Admiral, former commander of the TSN Odyssey." Jake's hands stilled on his work. Admiral had been his commanding officer during his Navy service, one of the few senior officers who'd understood Jake's unconventional approaches to engineering problems. Had also been the one to arrange for Jake's honorable discharge rather than a court-martial when Jake had refused orders. "Put him through." Admiral's weathered face appeared on the workshop's main display, and Jake was struck by how much the man had aged in the years since their last meeting. "Hello, Jake. I hope you're well." "Admiral, this is unexpected. How did you get this frequency?" "I have my sources. Jake, I'm calling because certain activities in your area have attracted attention at the highest levels of government. There are reports of impossible technologies and dramatic improvements in spacecraft performance. Reports that some very powerful people are taking very seriously." Jake felt his stomach clench. If government forces were mobilizing in addition to corporate interests, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. "I don't know what you're talking about, sir." Smiled sadly. "Jake, I've known you for 15 years. You couldn't lie convincingly then, and you haven't improved with age. Whatever you're doing out there, whatever you've discovered, you need to understand that the wolves are circling." "Wolves like Meridian Dynamics?" "Among others. Jake, there are forces within the government that believe any advanced technology should be controlled by military authorities. There are corporations that see potential profit in anything you can't explain. And there are some very paranoid people who think you might be working with hostile aliens." His ears perked up at that last comment, and Jake saw understanding flash in the alien's amber eyes. The irony was almost funny. The paranoid people were right, just not in the way they imagined. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" "Officially, I recommend full cooperation with any government investigation, complete transparency about your methods, and voluntary surrender of any advanced technology for proper study and regulation." "And unofficially?" His expression became serious. "Unofficially, I remember a young engineer who saved 300 lives by refusing to follow orders that would have sacrificed them for political convenience. I remember someone who cared more about doing what was right than what was profitable or expedient." The Admiral paused. "Jake, if you've stumbled across something important, something that could change everything, make sure it ends up in the right hands. The world has enough powerful people who use technology to hurt rather than help." The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at the blank display. Admiral's message was clear. Time was running out and decisions had to be made. "Your Admiral is a wise human," observed. "He sees the larger picture." "He does, and he's right about the wolves circling. Jake turned to face his alien partner. How long would it take to contact your people, to request permission for official first contact? Several months for the message to reach the council, several more for them to reach a decision and dispatch an official delegation. His tail twitched with nervous energy. Too long to prevent your technology from falling into the wrong hands. Then we do this ourselves. We make contact on our terms with people we trust before the corporations and paranoid government officials can interfere. Studied Jake with those incredibly expressive amber eyes. You would risk everything on the hope that humanity will choose cooperation over exploitation. I've already risked everything, Jake pointed out. The moment I decided to repair your ship, I committed to believing that intelligence and compassion matter more than fear and greed. And if you are wrong, if your species chooses to use technology for warfare and domination. Jake considered the question seriously. He thought about Admiral's principled stand against political expedience, about the spacers who'd trusted him with their vessels, about evolution from simple AI to true consciousness. He thought about his decision to trust a stranger with its life, and the months of collaboration that had followed. Then at least we'll have given them the chance to choose something better, Jake said finally. Sometimes that's all you can do. His tail began wagging slowly, and Jake recognized the sign of a decision being made. Very well. We accelerate our timeline, but we will need allies, humans who can be trusted with the truth about my presence here. I have someone in mind, Jake said, thinking of Admiral's coded message. Someone who spent his career putting principles before profit. The scrapyard's quiet was broken only by the soft humming of alien technology and the distant sound of Earth's wind through the metal debris. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new dangers. Tonight, Jake began planning humanity's introduction to a larger universe. The choices they made in the coming days would determine whether that introduction led to a golden age of cooperation or a dark age of exploitation and conflict. No pressure at all. The emergency council meeting took place in Admiral's private residence on Luna, far from the listening ears and watching eyes of Earth's various intelligence agencies. Jake had never seen the Admiral's home before, and he was surprised by its simplicity. The man who had commanded humanity's most advanced deep space exploration vessels lived in a modest apartment with furniture that looked like military surplus and walls lined with old-fashioned paper books. I have to admit, Jake, when you said you needed to discuss matters of interplanetary security, I was expecting something a bit different, Admiral said as he poured coffee from an ancient ceramic pot. Though I should have known you'd find a way to complicate my retirement. Sat quietly in the corner, having spent the 3-day journey to Luna hidden aboard Jake's modified cargo hauler. The alien had refused to reveal itself until Jake was certain of its trustworthiness, and even now its posture suggested readiness for immediate flight. Admiral, Jake began carefully, what I'm about to show you will change everything you think you know about humanity's place in the universe. I need your word that you'll hear us out before making any decisions. Studied Jake's face with the calculating gaze of a man who'd spent decades making life-or-death decisions based on incomplete information. You have my word, son. But Jake, if this involves illegal technology acquisition or contact with hostile forces. It involves contact with non-hostile forces, Jake interrupted gently. Admiral, I'd like you to meet Commander of the Deep Exploration Corps. Rose smoothly from its chair and approached with fluid grace. The Admiral's coffee cup hit the floor with a crash that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Dear God, whispered, staring at with the expression of a man whose fundamental understanding of reality had just been shattered. You're actually. Alien, yes, said, and Jake could hear amusement in the alien's voice. I apologize for the deception, Admiral, but caution seemed prudent given the hostile reception my ship encountered upon entering your system. Sank back into his chair, his military bearing struggling with shock and wonder. This is impossible. We have no records of alien contact, no evidence of other intelligent species in local space. That is by design, explained patiently. My people prefer to observe new species from a distance until we can determine their suitability for contact. Unfortunately, my reconnaissance mission encountered complications. Jake spent the next hour explaining the events of the past months, from discovering's damaged ship to the corporate threats that had precipitated their current crisis. listened with the focused attention of a professional intelligence officer, asking pointed questions and taking careful notes. So Meridian Dynamics knows about advanced technology, but not about its presence, summarized when Jake had finished. And you believe they'll return with greater force to seize whatever process you're using. They've already begun lobbying for government intervention, Jake confirmed. Our contacts in the aerospace industry report that Meridian is claiming I've illegally acquired alien technology and am using it to undermine fair competition. Which is technically true, pointed out with dry humor. You have acquired alien technology, and you are certainly undermining fair competition. The Admiral turned to, Commander, what would happen if humanity gained access to your technology through corporate theft rather than official diplomatic channels? His ears flattened against its skull in what Jake had learned to recognize as serious concern. The consequences would be severe. My people monitor all distributed technology carefully. If science is used for purposes we consider harmful, warfare, oppression, environmental destruction, the consequences include complete technological quarantine and possible military intervention. Military intervention, repeated thoughtfully. What would that entail? Selective destruction of all derived technology, followed by isolation protocols that would prevent your species from achieving interstellar travel for several centuries. His tone remained calm, but Jake could see the tension in the alien's posture. My people have dealt with aggressive species before, Admiral. The galaxy is large enough that problematic civilizations can simply be avoided until they either mature or destroy themselves. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. Humanity stood at a crossroads, with access to technologies that could solve every problem from energy scarcity to interstellar travel. But the wrong choices could lock them away from the galactic community for generations. What do you recommend? Asked after a long silence. Controlled disclosure, Jake said immediately. We identify key individuals in the scientific and political communities who can be trusted with the truth. We demonstrate the benefits of cooperation while establishing safeguards against misuse. We show humanity that we're ready for the larger universe. And if we choose wrong, if the people we trust turn out to be untrustworthy, then we've lost nothing except time, pointed out. But if we succeed, your species gains access to knowledge that could transform your civilization. Clean energy, faster-than-light travel, biological technologies that could eliminate disease and extend indefinitely. Stood and walked to his apartment's single window, staring out at the lunar landscape. Jake could see the Admiral's reflection in the glass, the expression of a man wrestling with decisions that would affect the entire human race. There's something you both need to know, said finally. The government investigation into your activities has already begun. A joint task force including representatives from Earth Security, Colonial Defense, and the Science Ministry will arrive at your facility in 4 days. Their orders are to secure all advanced technology and detain anyone involved in its development. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. 4 days, that's not enough time to. It's enough time if we move quickly and make the right choices, interrupted. Jake, I've spent my entire career serving humanity's interests. I've seen what happens when fear and greed drive policy decisions. But I've also seen what's possible when humans cooperate instead of compete. The Admiral turned back to face them, and Jake saw the decision crystallizing in the older man's eyes. I'm going to make some calls. People I trust, scientists and political leaders who understand that humanity's future depends on wisdom rather than power. The expression became grimly determined. We're going to arrange a demonstration of human-alien cooperation that will make it impossible for the corporations and paranoids to control the narrative. What kind of demonstration? Jake asked. The kind that saves lives and proves beyond doubt that we're better together than apart. Activated his personal communication system. Dr. Sarah Martinez, this is Admiral. I need you to listen very carefully. The next 3 days passed in a blur of frantic preparation and careful coordination. Admiral's network of trusted contacts proved more extensive than Jake had imagined, including scientists, politicians, military officers, and even a few carefully vetted journalists. Each conversation followed the same pattern: shock, disbelief, careful questioning, and finally acceptance of the truth. Dr. Sarah Martinez, director of the Mars Terraforming Project, became their first official convert whence bioatmospheric processors solved engineering problems that had stymied human scientists for decades. Senator James Harrison, chair of the Colonial Development Committee, joined the group after seeing how technology could revolutionize interplanetary travel. Most importantly, General, current head of Earth Security, agreed to delay the government task force by 24 hours after convinced her that premature action could trigger an interstellar incident. You have one chance to prove that cooperation is preferable to confiscation, warned during their secure communication. If this demonstration fails, or if there's any indication of threat to Earth's security, my people will take control of the situation immediately. Jake understood the subtext. They had 24 hours to change the course of human history or watch it spiral into conflict and isolation. The demonstration took place at the Ceres mining station, the largest industrial facility in the asteroid belt. The station's fusion reactors had been operating at reduced efficiency for months due to cascade failures in their power distribution network. Traditional repairs would have required shutting down operations for weeks, costing millions of credits, and potentially threatening the food supply for several colonial worlds. Jake arrived aboard the upgraded cargo hauler, accompanied by Admiral and a small group of carefully selected observers. The station's management had been told only that experimental repair techniques would be tested, with no mention of alien involvement. Remember, cautioned as they docked with the massive industrial facility, we have one chance to prove that humans and aliens can work together for mutual benefit. Everything depends on the next few hours. The fusion reactor complex was a testament to human engineering ambition and the harsh realities of space-based industry. Massive reactors hummed with barely contained stellar fire, their energy channeled through distribution networks that resembled the nervous system of some gigantic mechanical organism. The cascade failures had created a pattern of damage that human engineers described as irreparable without complete system replacement. Studied the complex for less than 10 minutes before identifying the core problem. Your engineers are thinking linearly, the alien explained to the assembled observers. They see each damaged component as a separate issue requiring individual solutions, but power distribution is an organic process. It requires systemic thinking, not component-level repairs. Working together, Jake began implementing bio-neural integration protocols throughout the reactor complex. Instead of replacing damaged components, they bridged them with living circuits that could adapt to changing conditions and route around future failures. The observers watched in fascination as the massive industrial facility began to respond to the hybrid technology. Power efficiency climbed steadily as the bioneural networks optimized energy flow in real time. More remarkably, the system began identifying and correcting minor problems autonomously, preventing the cascade failures that had plagued the station for months. Incredible, breathed Dr. Martinez, watching her instruments register efficiency levels that exceeded the reactor's original design specifications. The improvement isn't just incremental, it's transformational. Senator Harrison was equally impressed. How long would traditional repairs have taken? 6 weeks minimum, replied Chief Engineer, the station's senior technical officer. Assuming we could find replacement components for systems this old, Jake's method has restored full functionality in 6 hours. But the most important observer was General, who had arrived via military transport to witness the demonstration personally. Jake watched nervously as the security director examined every aspect of the repair process, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. Commander, said finally, I need to understand the implications of this technology for Earth's security. Can these bioneural systems be weaponized? His ears flattened slightly, but its voice remained steady. Any technology can potentially be weaponized, General, but bioneural systems are designed to enhance and preserve life, not destroy it. They will actively resist integration with weapons systems or aggressive applications. And if someone forced such integration, the bioneural components would degrade rapidly and eventually fail completely. My people learned long ago that technology based on life-supporting principles cannot be perverted to life-destroying purposes without destroying itself. Nodded thoughtfully. What about surveillance applications, industrial espionage? Again, possible but self-limiting. Bioneural systems require cooperation to function properly. They cannot be used to spy on or manipulate unwilling subjects. His tail began wagging slightly as it warmed to its subject. General, technology is specifically designed to promote cooperation and mutual benefit. It works best when all parties involved consent to its use. The station's celebration that evening was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. Word of the successful repairs had spread throughout the facility, and workers who had been facing months of uncertainty and reduced rations were eager to express their gratitude. The party that erupted in the station's main recreation area was spontaneous and joyful. "You've given us our lives back," Chief Engineer told Jake with tears in her eyes. The corporate bosses were talking about shutting down the entire operation. Half the station's population would have been out of work. Jake felt the familiar warmth of a job well done, but also the weight of responsibility for what came next. The demonstration had been successful beyond their wildest hopes, but now came the harder challenge of managing humanity's introduction to galactic civilization. Jake, Admiral approached with General and the other observers in tow. "I believe we're ready for the next phase." The next phase involved carefully orchestrated disclosure to Earth's major governments and scientific institutions. The success at Ceres had provided irrefutable proof that human-alien cooperation was not only possible, but remarkably beneficial. General had agreed to support controlled contact protocols, while Senator Harrison began the delicate process of preparing the Colonial Senate for formal first contact procedures. But not everyone was pleased with the developments. "This is completely unacceptable," Commander announced via secure communication from Meridian Dynamics corporate headquarters. "Has clearly made contact with hostile alien forces and is using their technology to undermine legitimate business interests." "The aliens don't appear to be hostile," General pointed out with barely concealed irritation. "In fact, they've demonstrated remarkable restraint given the corporate espionage attempts against their technology. Restraint that could be a cover for intelligence gathering. We have no idea what information has provided to these creatures or what their true intentions might be." Jake listened to the conversation with growing anger. After everything they'd accomplished, after proving beyond doubt that cooperation was beneficial to everyone involved, there were still people determined to view first contact as a threat to be neutralized. "Commander," Jake said, cutting into the corporate security officer's rant, "you've seen the demonstration results. You know that this technology could solve energy crises, revolutionize space travel, and improve life for billions of people. Why are you so determined to treat it as a threat?" "Because alien technology in the hands of unregulated individuals represents an unacceptable security risk," replied coldly. "Meridian Dynamics has the resources and expertise to properly evaluate and control advanced technology. You're just a mechanic playing with forces beyond your understanding." "Actually," interjected quietly, "Jake understands our technology better than most engineers. His intuitive approach to bioneural integration has led to innovations that my own people will find fascinating." His expression hardened. "Which proves my point. Has shared human technological secrets with alien forces, possibly compromising our entire civilization's security." "The only secrets I've shared," Jake said angrily, "are how to fix broken things and how to work together instead of against each other. If you find those concepts threatening, maybe you need to examine your priorities." The argument continued for another hour, but Jake could see that the momentum was shifting away from corporate control and toward proper diplomatic protocols. Admiral's network had done its work well, building support for cooperation among key decision-makers while isolating the voices calling for aggressive intervention. That evening, as Jake and prepared for the journey back to Earth, Admiral pulled them aside for a private conversation. "You've accomplished something remarkable," the Admiral said seriously. "But you need to understand that this is just the beginning. First contact will bring changes that none of us can fully predict. There will be people who benefit from cooperation and people who lose power because of it. Some of them will fight very hard to prevent what you're trying to build." "We know," Jake replied. "But we also know that the alternatives are worse. Humanity can join the galactic community as partners, or they can be isolated until they mature enough to handle the responsibility." "And you believe we're ready for that responsibility?" Jake thought about the celebration at Ceres Station, about workers whose lives had been saved by cooperation between species. He thought about admirals' principled stand against expedience, about generals' willingness to trust rather than fear, about the scientists and politicians who'd chosen wisdom over paranoia. "I believe we have people who are ready," Jake said finally, "and maybe that's enough to start with." Smiled and clapped Jake on the shoulder. "It'll have to be, son, it'll have to be." As their ship departed Luna for the journey back to Earth, Jake looked out at the stars with new understanding. Humanity was about to take its first tentative steps into a larger universe, and the choices made in the coming days would determine whether those steps led to partnership or conflict. But for the first time since discovering S damaged ship, Jake felt genuinely hopeful about the outcome. They'd proven that cooperation was possible, that fear could be overcome by understanding, that broken things could be made whole again. Sometimes, that was all it took to change the world. 6 months after the series' demonstration, Jake stood before the newly constructed Cooperation Center on Luna, watching as the final bio-neural integration systems came online. The building itself was a marvel of human collaborative engineering, its flowing organic curves growing naturally from Luna's ancient regolith, while housing the most advanced technology either species had ever developed. "The integration is perfect," observed, its tail wagging with satisfaction as monitoring displays showed optimal function across all systems. "The building itself is alive, adapting to the needs of its occupants while maintaining perfect environmental balance." Jake smiled as he watched human and engineers working side by side, their initial awkwardness having given way to genuine friendship and mutual respect. The past months had brought challenges that would have seemed impossible to overcome, but also breakthroughs that exceeded everyone's wildest hopes. The formal first contact protocols had been completed 3 months earlier, when the Council's diplomatic vessel arrived in Earth's solar system. The massive bioship, more grown than built, had caused a sensation among Earth's population that made Jake grateful for Admiral's careful preparation. By the time official contact occurred, enough key figures in human government and science already knew about that panic was avoided. Not that everything had gone smoothly. Mr. Director Elizabeth Hayes of the new Cooperation Authority approached with the measured stride of a career diplomat. "The Meridian Dynamics situation has been resolved. Their claims of technology theft have been officially dismissed, and their corporate security forces have been ordered to cease all surveillance activities." Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he'd been carrying for months. Meridian Dynamics had fought the official first contact protocols with every legal and extra-legal means at their disposal, including several attempts to raid Jake's scrapyard and steal technology for reverse engineering. The corporation's aggressive tactics had ultimately backfired when bioneural systems proved impossible to replicate without willing cooperation from their living components. "What finally convinced them to back down?" Jake asked. "Economics, ironically enough." Director Hayes smiled with professional satisfaction. When they offered to license their technology through proper diplomatic channels, Meridian realized they could make more profit through cooperation than theft. Their board of directors voted to join the technology consortium rather than continue fighting it. And Commander, reassigned to corporate relations. Apparently, her expertise in aggressive acquisition has been redirected toward competitive negotiation. They find her quite amusing, actually. Jake could imagine, had often observed that human business practices were entertainingly dramatic compared to economic systems, which were based more on ecological sustainability than profit maximization. The Cooperation Center represented the culmination of months of careful planning and delicate negotiation. Built on Luna to symbolize humanity's growing presence in space, the facility served as both embassy and research center, housing diplomatic staff from 17 different species alongside human scientists and engineers. Because they weren't the only ones who had been watching humanity's development. "The delegation will arrive tomorrow," Director Hayes continued. "Their expertise in crystalline engineering should complement the bioneural integration projects beautifully, and the Morphic Collective is sending a research team next month to study human approaches to adaptive problem-solving." Jake shook his head in amazement. What had started as a simple repair job in his scrapyard had snowballed into humanities.